What's up guys, welcome to vizxlization. This is Nestor Adrianzen. Quick question, how familiar are you with some of the best practices in DAX? So if you're not familiar, it's okay. Today I'm gonna show you 5 great tips so you will be awesome in DAX. But before you get started, if this is the first time that you stop by this channel, please make sure that you hit the subscribe button so you will be up to date with the content. Alright? So now let's go to the first point. Before we get into the tips, let's learn more about DAX. So what is DAX? So according to this source, DAX stands for Data Analysis Expressions, and it's a programming language that is used throughout Microsoft Power BI for creating calculated columns, measures, and also custom tables. It's also a collection of functions, operators, and constants that can be used in a formula or expression to calculate and return one or more values, right? This is really important to be aware of. And now guys, let's go to the first tip. All right, so one of the first tips that we have here is about reduce the number of calculated columns. Okay, so remember here, a measure does not really belong to any table. So you can move a measure from one table to another without losing its functionality. Okay, also remember, measures operate on aggregations of data defined by the current context. So this is important as well. And the other thing here is that measures, they don't consume memory. So that's another good feature that measures have, right? On the other hand, when I'm talking about new columns here, so the content of a new column is defined by the DAX expression, evaluated row by row. So calculated columns are computed during data refresh and then stored in the model. As a consequence here, calculated columns occupy space in memory. So that's the main reason, right? Like I said before, new measures, they are just calculations. They don't consume memory, right? Unless that you are using that measure. But calculated columns, on the other hand, they definitely consume or occupy space in memory. So that's the main reason that we need to use measures instead of columns. So please keep this in mind. This is a great tip. And now let's go to the second point. Use variables. Okay, so this is a good one as well. So variables basically are used to store results from DAX expressions, like you guys can see here on the screen, right? So we have right here a variable, so the word var here, finding the variable, and then we have the name of the variable, and finally we have the expression. And then the other main part of variables is the word return, where here is basically returning the final outcome, right? But if you guys want to learn more about variables, I already created a tutorial. I'm going to share with you the link so you can go and check the content there as well. There are two benefits, right, to use variables. Variables are important for at least two reasons. Like I said before, it's about code readability and also performance. And we have an example here that I'm going to show you guys so you will see the difference, okay? Now let's go to the next tip. This is also a good one. Use the divide function to perform a division. Remember here we have two options, right? In DAX we can use the divide function, or we can also use the divide operator, which is the forward slash, as you guys can see right here, right? So this is the forward slash, and we also have right here the divide function. So what is the recommendation here? Like I said before, when you write a DAX expression to divide a numerator by a denominator, you can choose to use the divide function or the divide operator, right? The forward slash. But that divide function was designed to automatically handle division by 0 cases. So what happens if the denominator is 0, for example, right? So you can handle this beautifully by using the divide function. Why? Because there is a third option here, which is the alternate result. So if the denominator is 0, if that's the case, just give me 0 instead, for example. But if we use just the divide operator, there is no way that we can do that, right? It's gonna give us an error anyways. Also, if we use the divide function, we can visualize them, right, in a more concise and elegant way. So those are the main reasons that we have to use the divide function instead of the divide operator. So now let's go to the next point. Format your DAX code. So this is also a great one. Some friends might say here, why do I have to format my DAX code? It's okay for me. I can write the code in just one line and it's okay for me. It might work if you don't have a lot of expressions there, right? But if you have more complex expressions and functions there, so you might get lost eventually. So that's why we need to format our DAX code. And there is a great source here, as you guys can see here on the screen. So there is this website called daxformatter.com, and this is a free tool by SQL BI, and that transforms your raw DAX formulas into clean, beautiful, and readable code. So we're gonna use that in an example as well. Remember, if you wanna format your code, what this website does is basically apply just standard rules. For example, never put a space between table name and column name. That's one of the rules that uses this website to format your code. Also, always put a space before parentheses, right? Things like that. So in the end, the main idea here is to have a more readable DAX code. We have an example about that as well. All right, so now let's go to the next point. Okay, so this is the last one. Your model should have a date table. Date table is also a calendar table. It's basically the same. You guys might be familiar with this. We can call it dates or calendar table, and we can use here the calendar function. We can also use the calendar arrow, but for this particular case, we're going to use just calendar here. And it has a start date and also an end date. So the question that I might have here is, why do I have to use a date table here? There is a couple of reasons here. It gives the model the flexibility to perform time intelligence calculations by using specific calculations, of course. What else? It helps to create relationships between a date table and other tables in the model, right? Because we already create a date table, we can connect it to the other tables in the model, the fact tables in the model, right? Also, we can use it to slice data by using one of its columns. So this is a good practice as well. And of course, when you create a date table or a calendar table, there are a couple of considerations there as well. It should include all dates in the period to analyze. It should have one column of datetime type, for example. Each day should be represented by a single row. There should be no gaps in the data. So if you want to learn more about date tables, calendar tables, I also work on a tutorial. I'm going to share with you guys the link here so you can take a look at it as well. So now guys, I already talked too much. So now let's go and solve the case, okay? So what is the question that we have here? Find the gross profit margin for each segment for 2014. There is a hint here, gross profit margin. It's basically a division here. The numerator, net sales minus cost of goods sold, everything divided by net sales, right? So please keep this in mind. And now let's go to Power BI Desktop. All right, so here we are in Power BI Desktop, and now this is the time, my friends. So before we get started, real quick, we have this table right here called financials, and this is the table that Microsoft provides, right? This is a free source, you guys can find it. So every time you open a new file, there is an option there to grab that table. So let's jump into data here. So real quick, we have the columns here. We have units sold, we have price, and we also have discounts. So what we need to find here to answer the question is net sales, right? Because we already have cost of goods sold right here, but we don't have net sales. So we need to calculate that value. So now guys, let's start playing with this data, okay? So in order to find net sales, we have two options here. We can create a calculated column or we can create a measure. Just for the example, because we already mentioned that we have to use measures, right? If we can do the same calculation by using measures and calculated columns, we should go with measures. But for this example, I'm going to do both, okay? All right, so the first thing we want to do here is the following. So let's go to financials here, right click, new column. So we want to create this new column called net sales, right? And I'm going to add right here CC because this is a calculated column. Okay, this is just as reference, my friends. Okay, so the calculation is going to be units sold, right, times sales price. No, sales price right here. Perfect. And because we also have discounts, we need to add discounts here as well. So that's basically the calculation that we have to perform to find net sales by using calculated columns, right? So how many units we sold, the price per unit, that's going to give us the total revenues, the total sales, but we also had discounts, so we had to subtract discounts as well. And then hit enter and let's see what happens. So it's thinking. So you guys can see it here, the new column. So let's go back to data here, and there it is. There is a new column here called net sales. Because this is a calculated column, we have CC right there. That's what we have, guys, for now. And the other option, like I said, is by using a measure. So let's go back to the report here and hit right here the option DAX measures, right click, new measure. And for this particular case, we're going to use an iterator. Okay, so net sales here equal, I'll enter, and the iterator, if you guys are familiar with this iterator, it's going to be sum x right there. I'll enter, and we need to reference the table. The table is called financials, right? So that's the first part of this awesome function, and then enter right here. And here we need to do the math, right? Remember, units sold times price right here. This should be times price, sales price right there. This should be minus discounts, right? It's right there. And there you go. I'll enter in close parentheses and then hit enter. And let's see what happens. So it's thinking. Bingo, my friends, it's already there. So now let's see if this measure and also the calculated column are working. So let's create a table here real quick. It's right there. So remember, the question was to find the gross margin by segment. Okay, so we have segment there. So now, so let's drag here net sales if we want. It's right there. Perfect. What else? If we use measures, the value here should be the same. Let's see if that's the case. So we have right here net sales right there. Bingo, my friends, it's working, right? So we are basically getting the same results by using calculated columns and also this new measure. Remember, like I said before, this is just as an example that I created the calculated column, but because we are getting the same results, we definitely need to use measures only. So what else? We can also add right here a slicer. It's right there. And let's select for now the date column from this table, the financials table. Remember, the question was just for 2014. So we can select 2014 here. And then this should be January, right? Right there. There you go. Perfect. So we have information just for 2014. So we can readjust this a little bit better. So what else do we need to do here? Now let's find the gross profit margin. So remember, if you guys can see here under DAX measures, we already have the gross margin one. So this is a calculation that I already performed, but this is not formatted. We're not using variables here. We're gonna go into this in a few minutes, okay? But what we need to do here is create a new measure because we care about gross profit margin here. And we're gonna call this gross profit margin, right? Equal here, I'll enter, and we're gonna use variables. All right, so the first variable, it's gonna be called total net sales, equal here. And we can also reference here the measure that we already created, which is net sales. Okay, the next variable here, this is gonna be total cost of goods sold. Okay, and this is gonna be sum every single cost of goods sold row, which is right there. Close parentheses right here. I'll enter. We need to create another variable here, which is going to be the difference between total sale and total cost of goods sold. So let's do that. We're going to call this gross margin. It's going to be equal here. And for this particular case, we want to reference the two variables right there. Total net sales minus total cost of goods sold right there. And finally here we need to use return. All right, I'll enter. Here we have two options. We can use just the divide operator, or we can use the divide function. So for the example, just let's use the divide operator. So the gross profit margin here should be, if you guys remember the formula, net sales minus cost of goods sold, which is gross margin right here, right? This should be divided by net sales. And net sales for this particular case, it's going to be total net sales right there. So that should be the calculation that we need to perform, right? But like I said, instead of the divide operator, we can use the divide function. But just for the example, let's hit enter and see what happens. So it seems like it's working, and let's drag this real quick. We can also add right here a percentage, because this is percentage, right there, 2 decimals, and let's drag this into here. It's working, guys. So it works perfectly, but like I said, the best practice is to use divide. So let's do that. So right here, divide, it's right there. And remember, the numerator right here should be gross margin, denominator sales. So remember here, we have the option, right? If for some reason the denominator is 0, so the whole expression will give us an error. But we don't want to have that. Instead, we want to see 0 there, if that's the case. So let's close parentheses and then hit enter, and let's see what happens. Boom. Basically the same results, guys. This is the best practice that we can perform here for this particular case. All right. So the question that we have now is, what could have happened if I didn't use variables here? So let's go to the measure that I already created. If you remember, I already created this measure right here. And here it is. With this expression, with these functions right there, so I'm basically getting the same results. Let's see what happens. So let's double check that real quick. Let's select right here the table, and let's drag this into the table. Boom. We can also add here percentages, right? Guys, we are getting basically the same results, but this code is not being formatted. So how do we format this? So let's copy this, Control C, and let's go to the website that I just mentioned. All right, so this is the website, guys, that I've been talking about. So it's a free website, DAX formatter. So what we need to do here is Control V and then hit format, and let's see what happens. Boom, there it is. So this is the best format that we have according to this website. So the next thing that we want to do, because we want to have a more readable code here, copy, and let's go back to Power BI Desktop, and right here we can replace it, right there, Control V, bingo, my friends. And then let's hit approve. So the results are going to be the same, because we are just changing the format, my friends. It's more readable. Guys, that's how it works. This tool is very helpful, and I hope you can take advantage of that as well. Alright, so now let's go to the last point here. So remember that we don't have a calendar table yet. When you have dates, it's highly recommended to have a calendar table. So let's create a calendar table here. So this is going to be just a basic calendar table, my friends. Let's go to modeling here and then new table. So let's call this dates, okay? Equal here. And we're going to use the calendar function. Start date, date right here, year. And we're going to use minimum. And the column is going to be the dates column from the financial table, okay? This is going to be the minimum value here. And then month, here we need to select January. It's a best practice to select the whole year, okay? So here we have January 1st, okay, comma here, and then right here, date again, year here, maximum here, the same reference here, financial table, and this is going to be December 31st, close parenthesis, there you go, hit enter and let's see what happens. So like I said, this is just a basic table, calendar table. If you want to learn more about calendar tables, I also have a tutorial. I'm going to share with you the link so you can take a look at it as well. So I already created this table, a calendar table. Let's go to data here and see what happens. Let's select dates here. There you go. So I already have this new table called dates. We have just one column here. And the next step here is to create a relationship between this dates table with the financials table. So we need to have the same format here. I'm going to select just date, okay? And here, I'm going to select the first one. Perfect. So let's go to financials here. And here, date, because this is going to be the connection. I need to make sure that I have the same format here, date, and then the same one right here. So we are good. So now let's go back to model here. And let's connect this dates table with the financials table. It's working. Perfect. Let's double check that. So we have the financials table connected with the dates table from many to one, single. Perfect. So this is working perfect. So, okay. Let's go back to report here. Remember here that this date is coming from the financials table. So we don't want to have that. Let's unselect this and then let's select dates from the calendar table. So remember here, we can move it if we want. So everything changes. So this is working perfectly. So right here, the question was just for 2014. We can make a couple of adjustments here as well. 2014, right? And then from January to December 31st. So guys, there you go. We have just answered the question that we had, and I hope you found this helpful. So now let's go back to our presentation. All right, guys, that was it. If you found the content helpful, please give me a thumbs up, share with your friends, leave your questions and comments below, and of course, don't forget to subscribe because you don't want to miss anything. Thank you guys, and see you in my next tutorial.